The delivery man raised his hand to knock, a routine end to a long day. But through the narrow glass pane beside the door, he saw her. She wasn't reaching for her wallet. She was standing in the open doorway of her refrigerator, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The light from the empty fridge poured out, framing her in a cold, lonely glow. In that instant, his simple delivery became something else entirely. Leo had been a delivery driver for 12 years. He knew the rhythm of the streets, the sound of his engine, the weight of packages in his arms. He was good at his job, efficient, polite, and blessedly on time. But in all those years, he had made it a rule to see only the door, the recipient, the signature. The lives behind the thresholds were not part of the delivery. Today's last stop was in a quiet, older neighborhood where the houses wore their age with a kind of tired grace. The package was a lightweight box addressed to a Mrs. Eliza Gray. The woman, Eliza, closed the refrigerator door slowly, as if the weight of it was too much. She wiped her cheeks with the heels of her hands, took a deep, shuddering breath, and smoothed her simple, worn sweater. When she opened the front door, her face was a careful mask of composure. Only the faint redness around her gentle hazel eyes gave her away. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice a little thick. "Come in, please. Just set it on the table there." Leo stepped inside, the box in his hands. The small living room was impeccably clean, but sparse. A single armchair faced an old television. Photographs of a smiling young man in a military uniform sat on the mantelpiece, alongside one of a much younger Eliza with a man, their faces bright with future. The air felt still, heavy with a quiet loneliness. He placed the box on the coffee table. "Need a pen to sign?" he asked, his usual script. "Oh, yes," she said, seeming to remember the procedure. As she bent to sign the handheld device, her eyes drifted to the box. A sad, soft smile touched her lips. "It's just a few books," she said, almost to herself. "My son, Ben, he sends them from where he's stationed. Says I need to keep my mind sharp." She handed back the device. "Thank you. You're the first person I've talked to today." The words hung in the air, simple and profound. Leo's rule, "Don't look, don't engage," cracked. He glanced toward the kitchen, where the humming fridge was now silent. "Everything okay, ma'am?" The question left his lips before he could stop it. Eliza followed his gaze, and the mask slipped again, just for a second. A fresh wave of tears welled up, but she blinked them back fiercely. "Oh, it's nothing. Just one of those days. The pension check. It's a little late is all. It happens." She waved a hand, a dismissal of her own struggle. "The fridge isn't really empty. There's pickles and mustard. A gourmet meal for one." She tried to laugh, but it broke into a quiet sob she couldn't contain. Embarrassed, she turned away. "I'm so sorry. You don't need to see this. You have other deliveries." But Leo didn't move. He stood there in her quiet, empty living room, and the image of her crying over that bare shelf replayed in his mind. He thought of the hundreds of insulated bags in his van, filled with restaurant meals for people who could afford the luxury of delivery. He thought of his own warm kitchen, always stocked. The conflict wasn't in the room, it was within him. The professional distance he'd cultivated for years warred with a much older, simpler instinct to help. "Wait here," he heard himself say, his voice firmer than he intended. Before she could protest, he was out the door, walking quickly to his van. His heart was pounding. "This isn't your business," one part of his mind argued. "You'll cross a line. You might offend her." But a louder part, the part that remembered his own grandmother living alone, simply said, "Look at the mustard and pickles." He didn't grab one of the delivery bags. Instead, he opened the cooler where he kept his own lunch and the few groceries he'd picked up for himself after his shift: a carton of eggs, some bread, cheese, a couple of apples, and a ready-made soup from the market. He put it all into a clean grocery bag.
Then he went to the back, where there was always a stash of non-perishable snacks, protein bars, packets of nuts, meant for his long days. He added those, too. When he returned to the door, Eliza was standing there, looking confused. He held out the bag, not stepping inside this time. "Please," he said, "it's just some extra stuff from my van. It'll go bad if I don't give it to someone. Would save me the trouble." He offered the gentlest lie he could think of. Eliza stared at the bag, then at his face. Her eyes searched his, not for pity, but for sincerity. She saw no judgment there, only a kind of determined kindness. Her proud shoulders, which had held the weight of her solitude, finally slumped in acceptance, not defeat. She took the bag, her fingers brushing his. The weight of it seemed to startle her. I can't pay you for this." "It's not for payment," Leo said softly. "It's for company. You said I was the first person you talked to today. Consider this the fee for the conversation." A real tear, this one of a different sort, escaped down her cheek. She opened the bag and peeked inside. The simple, wholesome food looked like a feast. Her breath hitched. "My Ben, he always said angels wear disguises." She looked up at him, this weary man in a uniform. He'd say, "You're one of them." Leo shook his head, deeply uncomfortable with the title, but warmed by it all the same. "Just a guy with a van and a little too much food," he said. Would it be okay if I checked in tomorrow, just to make sure those books arrived in one piece?" The realization blossomed on Eliza's face then, the realization that this wasn't just about one bag of food. It was about a thread of connection deliberately offered. It was about seeing and being seen. The cold, lonely light from the fridge was gone, replaced by the warm glow of the living room lamp, and for the first time that day, it felt like it was shining on something good. "I'd like that," she whispered. "I'll put the coffee on." Leo nodded, a lump in his own throat. He gave a small wave and walked back to his van. The empty street didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt peaceful. He didn't drive off immediately. He just sat for a moment, the silence in the cab now a comfortable one. The next day, after his shift, Leo didn't go straight home. He stopped by Eliza's with 2 cups of fresh coffee and a loaf of banana bread from a local bakery. She did have the coffee on, and the books from her son were open on the table. That became the new routine. Sometimes he'd bring soup. Sometimes she'd saved a cookie from a church bundle. They talked about Ben, about their family, about nothing and everything. The empty fridge filled up slowly, but more importantly, the empty space that solitude carves into a person began to fill, too, with friendship. It wasn't a grand miracle. No debts were erased, no illnesses cured, but a profound shift had occurred. A man who had trained himself to see only doors learned to see the person standing in them, and a woman who believed the world had forgotten her found a gentle reminder, delivered with a knock, that it had not. Sometimes the most sacred deliveries don't come in a box with a label. They arrive in quiet moments of seeing, in bags offered without expectation, and in the simple, courageous act of accepting help. We are all just waiting for someone to see our empty shelf and offer, without a word, to share their bread. Share this story if it reminded you that kindness is a language every heart understands.